to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is You Are Not Your Story. So there's a point in our evolution, our development, where we get to a place of clarity where we're no longer identified with the stories of our traumas and even our triumphs, that they can inform us in our lives rather than be us or us be them. And there's, especially with stories of trauma and pain, when we get beyond the story, there's a profound sense of freedom. So we're going to talk about that today. But before we get started, let's take a couple minutes to get present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, and creating this brilliant beam of light from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together. Rub your hands vigorously together. Feel all the tension, the texture, the temperature. And as you stop rubbing them together, feel the buzzing. And allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's so good to be here with you this morning. And today we are talking about You Are Not Your Story. So, many of us have had experiences of trauma and pain and feeling victimized, maybe being victims. And those stories of our lives are often the lens through which we view our experience, and not only our experience, but it's often the way that we define ourselves. We identify with our history and therefore see the world through the lens of those experiences. There's a point at which we come to healing that we can recognize that those things happened, that happened, and it doesn't have to define me. We can be enriched by the awarenesses and the experience and the transformations that we've experienced as a result of instances in our lives, and recognize how those things perhaps have shaped us. But we don't have to be bound to those things as our definition. So I'm just wanting to say, if you guys are writing comments and I'm not responding, it's simply because I don't see the comments. So if you want to write comments, make sure that you're at the Enlightened World Network Facebook page or YouTube channel. And if you put your comments in there, I should be able to see them, and then I can respond. So it's really interesting when we look at our experiences, and this is kind of a little sidebar topic, but it's very, very important when we talk about identifying with our experiences, because what happens is we have certain patterns. We're taught patterns. We're either taught by our upbringing, where we see family members or community members interacting in particular ways, and we learn that those are the ways to interact. We're told that we're not doing things right, or we're not good enough, or any number of other things that we might be being told as we grow up, and we learn to question ourselves and criticize ourselves. And then in life, when circumstances arise, we employ these patterns or deploy these patterns against ourselves with self-criticism and blame and shame. And one of the things that we can do, which I think is really, really powerful if you allow it to sink in deeply, is to recognize that so many of these behaviors are patterns. They're not our essence. They're just patterns. So the patterns of self-blame and self-shame, these are things that we get taught in many, many ways. And when we can identify those patterns of behavior as patterns of behavior and not our essence, then what happens is that we can remove ourselves from the perpetuation of that kind of damage that just will otherwise amplify itself. Good morning, Bernadette. So good to have you here with us this morning. We're talking about how you are not your story. And when I talk about story, I'm not talking about something that is just fabricated, that isn't true. I'm not talking about that. I mean, many of us have experienced deep trauma in our lives, and I'm not saying to be in denial about those experiences. However, we can allow those experiences to define us by identifying with those things and making that our identity. Like, I am a cancer survivor, or I am a rape survivor, or I am a survivor of domestic violence, or any number of other things. When we identify with our story, it binds us to certain capacities even. It binds us to certain ways of relating to ourselves and the world. So Bernadette says, I periodically dabble back into taught behavior. It took many years to change my raised belief system. Well, congratulations to you, Bernadette, because so many people live lives without even questioning, without even noticing that there's a learned belief system, or learned patterns of behavior. And I venture to say that, I was talking yesterday with a client who really was raised with experience after experience that validated I can't get what I want. And so with that kind of lens to view the world, there's always a struggle. By definition, there's the struggle or resignation, one or the other. There's a struggle believing I can't get what I want, so I have to fight for it. I have to struggle for it. Or there's the resignation of I'm not even going to try because I know I can't get what I want. And I think that there's this fluctuation between those two spaces. And when we identify with that kind of story, it shapes all of our interactions in the world. And what was amazing in this session that we did yesterday is this person actually was able to step away from the story, to leave it behind and to say, yeah, that happened. And it's not who I am. And now I get to explore who I am and how I choose to be in the world, not at the effect of that story. So it's a valuable thing to recognize that we are not our behaviors, just like we're not our stories, we're not our behaviors. So I was talking with another client who was beating themselves up for behavior that they didn't feel good about, so first of all, we have these behaviors, and then we judge ourselves for the behaviors, right? You're so right, Bernadette. Every story can change via the narrator. Exactly. And when we recognize that we can transform our stories, we have then the ability to be transforming our lives. So what was happening is that this person was just beating themselves up relentlessly about certain things that had happened and ways they'd responded, and we were able to just come to the awareness of, you know what, it's a behavior. You learned that behavior. You learned it really, really well. And when you're not the behavior. And so when you can recognize it as a behavior instead of judging it, you can maybe recognize, wow, that behavior is a call for help. That behavior is a call for love. That behavior is a cry of pain. And rather than beating ourselves up for it, maybe we get to have compassion for ourselves and say, oh my gosh, I'm recognizing this part of myself that's in such deep pain. How can I give myself love and understanding for that, to evolve beyond it, to heal it? When we're used to being criticized and beat up for not being good enough, or for perceived failings, then our tendency is to continue to beat ourselves up for not being good enough and for continued failings, right? Whereas what if, when we notice those moments, we can respond in a life-affirming way. We can respond in a way that says, wow, I see how beat up you are. How about some love? Let's have some love and recognize that you're okay. You're okay. And you don't have to be perfect. And Bernadette says, I still have triggers of childhood trauma. But what has changed is that I see it now and I don't react to it in the scared child state. Powerful, 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 Bernadette. Recognizing, I mean, I think that we probably all have triggers until we transcend, if and when that happens. So it is a matter of being able to recognize those triggers and not be caught in the automatic reaction to them. So congratulations to you. That's super, super powerful. First, that you're able to recognize those triggers. And second, that you're able to respond to them in a different way. I think when we can respond to ourselves with compassion and care, that is so profoundly healing, rather than being frustrated or angry that we still have this trigger, rather than compounding the trauma or reinforcing the trauma by perpetuating the same damaging behavior. Good morning, Rosalind. So good to have you here with us this morning. So Rosalind says, with family who criticizes you and has expectations, holding space for love can be done from a distance until you're not triggered. I hear you. Yeah, sometimes the triggers are just so constant and so powerful that the only way to begin to heal is to separate yourself from those triggers. And if family isn't there to trigger us, there will be other circumstances in life that provide the same opportunity for us to heal. So with criticisms, I think if we become proactive to recognize the pattern of criticism and make it not personal. And I know that that's really challenging, because when somebody's telling you about you this, you that, it's hard not to take it personally. The thing is that when someone, including ourselves, when we're telling somebody else, well, you did this and you did that and you're this way, or somebody's telling us that, it's a reflection of the person that's doing the telling. Not to say that there might not be some basis in truth to observe, to recognize, oh, wow, maybe that is something that I do or have done. Maybe that is something I get to pay attention to. But for the most part, when someone is, whether it's ourselves or somebody else, when someone is I'm going to say attacking, it's usually about them. It's about their reactivity. So Bernadette says, I'm not perfect in any way, shape, or form. I just recognize the hurt now in many situations. Having people around me to point out my unawareness has been beneficial. Still learning. So when those people are able to point out awarenesses in a compassionate way, that can be a gift. Even if they point out awarenesses in dispassionate or angry ways, that can be a benefit if we have the ability to hear. But it's so powerful, Bernadette, to be able to recognize the hurt. When we can feel the hurt and presence ourselves to that, then we don't necessarily have to lash out in response, right? We can feel the hurt and we can say, wow, that hurt. Something's going on for me. I need to kind of regroup or put my attention on this and discover more of what's there. So a client yesterday said something that was wonderful, which was, instead of looking at myself with disdain and disgust for patterns that I don't like, rather than shaming and blaming myself, I'm becoming more curious. And I think that that's such a powerful transformational tool, is curiosity. Because rather than shaming or blaming or censoring or repressing or any of those things, what we get to do is to say, wow, that's really interesting. What's that about? And we get to be our own investigators, and we get to discover the dynamics around so many of these patterns that we have. What's that about? Where'd that come from? What's underneath that? What's going on? So good morning, Gia. So good to have you here with us this morning. Welcome. And Bernadette says perfect transformation. And I don't know if you're saying perfect transformation or perfect transformation. Because if we're, like to move toward that perfecting of something, we're talking about practice, as presence, enough presence to be cultivating our broader awareness. And yeah, I think that there's a lot to that, to be cultivating curiosity rather than judgment, to move from judgment to curiosity, because judgment assumes a lot. What are we assuming when we're judging something? First of all, we're assuming that we know what's best. We're assuming that we know on some level. Either we're saying we know or we don't care what the mitigating circumstances are. And coming from a place of judgment is a reflection of our own worldview, right? So Bernadette says, practice makes perfect. LOL. Yes, we're talking about perfecting, right? So anyway, when we talk about judgment, when we're judging ourselves or we're judging someone else, there's an underlying assumption of the way things should be and a projection of that, like, I'm judging you because you didn't do this, that, or the other thing, or because you did do this, that, or the other thing. And judgment is, I guess we get to look at what the distinction is between discernment and judgment. If I'm passing judgment on someone or something, whether it be myself or someone else, if I'm passing judgment, I'm kind of closing the book. And sometimes that's appropriate for our own self-preservation, or to be able to move forward. Sometimes we pass judgment, in that, and allows us to close the book, right? But there are ramifications of closing the book, especially if we're judging ourselves or judging those we love, or judging others that we don't even understand. That it's, again, getting curiosity is an antidote maybe for judgment. And maybe curiosity is one of the most important ingredients in really truly being able to connect with others, is to be curious rather than to be judging. I mean, everything has its place, even judgment. Everything has its place. But the greater our awareness, the greater our presence, the greater the potential for appropriate action and response, I think. Anyway, just be clear. You are not your behavior, and you are not your story. Your story, your behavior, your beliefs, your patterns, all of it is overlaid on this essence that you are. And the more that we're able to free ourselves from the identification with our behaviors and our stories, the more capacity we have to be a more fully authentic expression of our essence. And that's where we're headed, right? Hopefully, I mean, like, that's the evolution and growth that we're headed into, is to being a more pure expression of the unique vehicle that we are for the expression of life. So Gia says, judging doesn't allow any space for seeing any further. Exactly. It's closing the book. Awareness allows us to hold space for anything external or internal. Exactly. And then we have the ability to be responsive because we're actually present to what's there. Beautiful way to end the morning. Thank you, thank you, thank you, all of you. Bernadette says, I've always believed that one needs to experience another situation to fully understand. We can all hold love and compassion for another to make the other person feel heard and loved without judgment. And that's the ideal, Bernadette, is to be able to walk in another's shoes. Sometimes it's very threatening because it means stepping outside of our judgments and our beliefs to be able to understand what it might be to be in another's footsteps or shoes. Anyway, I've got to run. I love you guys so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection. And I go live here each weekday morning on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel at 9 a.m. Eastern. And I encourage you to check out the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network, EWN One with the Earth, Enlightened World Living. And until next time, so much love to you. Hope to see you again here really, really soon.